our usual format is to chant at the beginning, take the refuges and 5 precepts. Which is a kind of a reminder to us to establish our practice in a kind of, it's conditioning, isn't it? We take the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts as to help us to not through the week. We can remember, oh yes, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. These refuges are there for us whenever we want, whenever we need them. And the 5 precepts, which, again, they support our practice in an incredibly valuable way. The foundation of our practice is sila. Now, it would be really good if I could see what I'm looking for to share the screen with. Let's see if I can do better. There we are. To the Blessed One, the Lord who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us, Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and Blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sangham saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhavadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precepts to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Veramani Sikkhavadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu Michachara Veramani Sikkhavadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada Veramani Sikkhavadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura Merya Majjapamadhatana Veramani Sikkhavadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Pancha Sikkhavadani Silena Sugatin Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Yanti Tasma Sila Visuddhaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I think most of you will know that the format is I lead a meditation and give some reflections, and then invite you to ask some questions. So it's good to think up some questions if you can, and then send them to me by text in the chat box. So how do we begin our meditation practice? For some people, it's helpful to take a few deep breaths, like maybe 2 or 3, just breathing in and breathing out. It's a way of letting go and brings our attention into the body. Establishing an upright posture. That means discovering what that is for yourself. We don't just assume some sort of statue-like pose, like a Buddha Rupa. Although that's a guide, that's not a living thing. It's a gentle, relaxed, upright posture. And so to help us, we look at the base of the spine, give our attention there. And perhaps feel the vertebrae gradually straightening. Remembering to relax the shoulders, trying as best we can to find a point of balance. Teasing that out, how does that feel? It's our best guess of what's not leaning one way or another. Giving close attention just to that point of balance, brings our attention into the body. So now we might become more attuned to sensations in the body. Noticing them perhaps in a methodical way, from the head down to the feet, from the feet up to the head, step by step, so as to bring those sensations into awareness, because the body's full of sensations, but we're not aware of it. So in order to be aware, that's helpful to scan methodically down the body, from the tip of the head, forehead, and around the eyes, the nose, jaw. And as we go, noticing areas of tension. Inevitably, there are areas of tension. We don't need to clench the teeth. We can drop the jaw. Noticing tension around the neck and the shoulders. It can be quite a shock to notice how much tension we're carrying that we weren't aware of. So we just, in a very simple way of just noticing, work our way down the body, through the upper body, arms, the hands, to the stomach, diaphragm, noticing how breathing affects the diaphragm. Noticing the buttocks and the upper leg. And muscles in the thighs, in the lower leg and the feet, sensations, the soles, the feet and the toes. And we can return up the body a little bit by little bit. Giving permission to tension where muscles are tense, giving them permission to unclench. That it's okay if you notice. If you notice a muscle that's tense in the leg, you can just let it go. See if that is possible. On the way up the body, as you journey up through the lower body to check the arms and the hands, the upper body, the shoulders and the neck. Journey up into the jaw and the cheekbones and the eye sockets, forehead, to the top of the head. You can journey down again just methodically, or you might begin to notice particular areas of where tension is most prominent. Or perhaps notice how things change. That the tension in the forehead isn't so great now. That the eye sockets, the cheekbones, the muscles are beginning to relax. That the teeth aren't clenched, that the jaw is relaxed. Quite naturally, you didn't do anything. It happened by itself, simply by giving attention. And it's okay to say relax, because that's just giving permission. That's not demanding anything, or not really doing anything. It's just using a word, like mantra, relax. Just relax. Just words like that can help. They're suggestive. As the body begins to relax, the breath becomes more noticeable. You might find that sensations of the body are less prominent. You might find the sensations of breathing an object that you find useful. Inhalation, exhalation. The practice of mindfulness is not interfering with anything. And so the breath is a good example of how we take an object but don't interfere with it. We just let it be. Simply observe, however it is, wherever we notice sensations as the breath enters the nose, perhaps. It's a good enough place to notice the breath. We may have thoughts which arise as why not? Why wouldn't we have thoughts? We're not saying thought shouldn't arise. It's the result of having mind that thoughts will arise. One way of practicing is to think of our experience in terms of it being a case study rather than being something personal. So we'll observe our experience through a curiosity almost scientific curiosity. So, oh, that's thought, that's feeling, this is sensation. These objects which come into the mind, we become more aware of when the mind calms down. Mental objects. We see them as mental objects, then lose their. We don't invest in them in the same way. We don't invest our sense of self in them. We observe them in a more detached way, like a case study. So someone like this observe another person rather than creating a sense of self out of it. That's just, oh, that's the mind. Oh, that's a mental object. This is the breath. So even the sense of me and mine, when that arises, we observe in a detached way. Oh, that's a feeling, it's mine. This is me. Feels like this. My thought feels like this. Whatever we create, whatever we add to our experience is just something that's added, isn't it? We can notice that. Oh, we're just adding something here, making something out of it. It's just thoughts coming and going, arising and ceasing. Just sensations. Perceptions. Whatever it is. Knowing that we have the body, the breath, to breathe into. So whatever arises, it doesn't matter what it is. We breathe into the experience, allowing it to come and go. When we focus our attention on one place, everything arises and ceases in that one place. So if you focus your attention on the inhalation and the exhalation, then everything, all our experience arises right there in that one place, when our mind is focused on that place. So whatever it is, thoughts, feelings, sensations, whatever, all arise in that point of focus. We don't go rushing around looking for experience. And we invite it to come to us, wherever it is from. It rises in this one place. External, internal, doesn't matter. We just let the mind rest in that one place. Our attention rests in that one place. Sounds arise right there. The place is irrelevant. It's simply a point of focus. Sustained attention is right here. It's not going anywhere. So even if we think the mind has wandered, we're experiencing distracted thoughts, then let go of the word distracted. Let the mind's content, the experience of the mind, simply come to your point of awareness. That point of sustained attention, which has maybe got no geographical position, but simply still is experienced as sustained attention right here. It's all right here. And it doesn't need to be physically located, yet it's still experienced as being here and now. So our sustained attention isn't really dependent on a physical location. We might get the sense of it being located, but it doesn't matter where it is. It's not a place. We can relax that sense of holding on to a location. Awareness doesn't depend on a location. We can open out our attention without losing that sense of focus. I thought I'd say some more about how you can use this idea of it being a case study, observing our meditation practice as though we were a case study. I find that quite interesting. And we don't mind making case studies out of other people, do we? Delight in analysing them and try and telling them when they're, I think that we think that we know what they're like and what's best for them, but we don't look at ourselves as being case studies. But actually in meditation practice, this is a good way to practice, I think. This is for me, I think I find this very helpful because it's a depersonalizing of our experience. So of course we experience things in a personal way, but we're the best case study we could possibly have, because we have, whereas we could, if we try to analyze other people, we're guessing, aren't we? We're always guessing about what they feel, what they think, why, what the conditions are that, of course, give them rise to these, their views and opinions and whatever it is. We're guessing, but if we have direct experience when we look at ourselves, we are the best case study we could have. We know, at least we have memory, we've got more idea about the conditions that come into play in our own lives than it's more reliable perhaps than any other person. So how would it be to make a case study of ourselves when we're meditating? So then when the Buddha taught the Satipatthana Sutta, he talked about body feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and content, Dhamma, different ways of seeing the mind. These are he would, in each of those contexts, you see the standard refrain, a kind of standard formula with regard to each. And one thing that recurs is it's just the body. This is just the feeling, just perception, just mental formation. Actually, I'm building in, making 5 out of 4, aren't I? Feeling, mental formations, and mental content. There are only 4 satipatthanas, but I guess I'm bringing in the 5 khandhas. It doesn't much matter. This sense of it's just this. So it's just the body rather than my body. It's just feeling rather than my feeling. It's just mental conditioning, just mental formations, rather than my thoughts, my emotions, and mental contents, which are these different ways of analysing our our experience through perhaps the 5 hindrances, or the 7 facts of enlightenment, or the 5 powers, or the 4 noble truths. And there's different ways of reflecting. But these are, everything is, it's just like this. It's just, say, take the 4 noble truths. It's just, this is just suffering. It doesn't help to think of it as mine. This is the experience. The suffering, it's a universal condition, isn't it? Pointing to the universal experience. So that's why to take it as ourselves as a case study can be helpful. Even when we add a sense of self, we can look at it, oh, this is what it's like when you personalize your experience. In other words, we even distance ourselves from that. So, oh, this is what it's like when I call it my suffering, my emotions. When I label them and own them, then this is the experience of that. So we're looking at it as a case study. Oh, if I feel angry, but this is the feeling of anger. But when I add the sense of it's my anger, this is how it changes. It becomes like this. This is what it's like when we attach a sense of self to the experience of anger. It's still a case study, an observation. We are observing in a scientific way. Oh, it's when we meditate, we notice how things change. The body begins to relax. We observe that as the natural process of the calming mind, the effect on the body of the calming mind. And when the body begins to relax, then you notice, oh, this is how that affects the mind. The mind starts to relax. When the body's relaxed, the mind is less restless. When the mind's less restless, the body begins to be more relaxed. We observe, just continually observe. And so then, it doesn't really require the doing activity. It's not a doing thing. Observation is simply sustained awareness. It's not, when we bring doing into it, then we think, I've got to find something to be aware of. I've got to, create as though we were to create the breath, to be aware of it, or to have a thought so that we could notice it. That's a kind of doing activity, trying to be aware. The mind searches for something to be aware of. But the awareness is possible now without us doing anything. We don't need to do anything in order to be aware. The inhalation happens whether we don't do it. We don't need to do it, do we? We don't need to do a feeling of emotion, an emotional state, that it happens and we can notice it. We can deliberately cultivate emotional states, we can deliberately also affect our breathing and make our breathing long or short. We can do that, but that doesn't help us in our meditation. It doesn't. It can get in the way. It certainly can give us the impression that mindfulness only happens when we're meditating, because if we think it's something, a kind of doing activity, only I have to sit on the cushion to be mindful, well, then that doesn't make any sense from a Buddhist perspective to think that way. But if we do think that way, then it creates the sense of there's this practice, and then there's the time when we're not practicing. We're practicing when we're sitting on a cushion, but we're not practicing when we stand up, and we think practice came to an end. Or if the bell rang, we think practice came to an end, meditation came to an end. This isn't a helpful way to think. That's when we think that we're doing meditation. It doesn't make any sense. Meditation is a continuous, moment by moment awareness. There's no beginning and end. That's an unhelpful way of thinking. It just doesn't. It's not a reality. There's no reality in saying anything begins that we can let's say the breath. It's an illusion to imagine that we really interfere with the breath. We can take a few deep breaths and that's it. We're back to breathing. We can't really. What can we do? But we can observe it. We can, for a while, we can interfere with mental activity, but sooner or later it just happens, because the mind is a receptacle for thoughts. It's just what the mind does. It thinks thoughts. So we might direct our mind in a particular way, but sooner or later it just thinks thoughts. So it's better just to notice the nature of the mind and body the way it is, and to interfere with it. At least that's how it, for me, that's how it is. And then we learn, as a sense, like a case study. Oh, this is what the mind's like when it's restless. And this is what the mind's like when it's sleepy. When the mind's confused. This is the experience of having a mind that's confused. I thought, oh, that's, you could, rather than going around saying, well, this person's confused, we look at our own mind and say, oh, this is what the experience of having a mind that's confused is like. We don't need to analyze other people but we can use our own experience and analyze that. It doesn't mean that we don't. I mean, I do analyze other people. I'm very interested in psychology, and it doesn't stop me analyzing other people. But I don't trust that, because I know I'm making it up. It's just all right. If I think, I saw somebody in the high street who was shouting very loudly on their phone at somebody, and they were swearing, and And my mind, I noticed I began to analyze them. I began to think, oh yeah, I said, I was with my wife and I said to her, oh, I wonder if that chap, I wonder if he grew up in a family where he always had to shout to get attention. That as a child, he never got listened to unless he shouted. And so now, as an adult, he just shouts down the phone like that at the poor person who's at the other end of it. Even, I mean, I could hear him way far away, so it was far more than was needed to speak on the phone. Now that way of analysing it's, you know, I have no idea. That's just what the mind does. We do analyse other people, and we can. This is what our minds work this way. But actually, we don't know anything about. I don't know anything about that person. I have no idea why he was having that conversation, shouting in that way. What happened to him as a child? So it's better to make a case study of our own experience when we do know something about what happened to us as a child, for example. If we're shouting at somebody, we don't have to become over analytical, but you know, we know it's to do with conditions. It's conditions that causes our behavior. We're conditioned beings. So rather than over analyzing the conditions that we suppose other people have experienced, we can notice or understand the conditions that we've experienced. But what is fundamental to the Buddha's teaching isn't really to analyze our conditioning and try to explain it all. Oh yes, I'm like this because of that. But to understand suffering, that's the core of the Buddha's teaching. So whatever it is that we're experiencing, when we understand, when we bring our attention to, does it hurt? You know, am I creating suffering out of this? Then that's reliable source of Buddhist reflection. Analyzing, trying to make sense of things is impossible. Ultimately, we'll never make sense. We can't make sense of the world, of our experience of the world. We can't do that. It's not possible. But we can understand suffering. And that's why the Buddha's first noble truth is there is suffering. Because if we focus our attention there's it's a reliable source of truth. It's something we can know. I might not be able to understand why it hurts, but I can know it hurts because it hurts. I can experience that. In a sense, I might not, what I mean is, I might not understand all of the conditions that came into play because it's impossible to understand cause and effect. And eventually you run out of conditions, the causes, it's too vast. You can't understand all that, but you can know it hurts. And you can know how you create suffering out of our experience. When we create suffering, we know how we do that, but it's out of resistance. We don't want it to be this way, or we want it to be otherwise. However, we want it when it's good, we want it to stay this way. We just want to be happy, but it can't be that way. Can't be. It's not possible to be happy all the time. When we're sad, when we're unhappy, we don't want to be unhappy. We think there's something wrong. But the Buddha's first noble truth is, no, there's nothing wrong about being unhappy. It's just the way it is. Suffering's like this. We don't need to make a problem out of not feeling happy the whole time. The truth, the Buddha's truth, the truth of, or the way out of suffering is through understanding. Not by understanding the reasons why I'm unhappy, but by just simply understanding it feels like this. This is what it's like. My experience is like this. I can understand it because I know, and I can open up fully to accept it. With suffering, we don't. We make all these ways, a lot of the techniques to try to understand are a way of avoiding suffering. So we, let's say, there's our partner says something, hold a view that we don't like, and it's very, but rather than experiencing the suffering that we're experiencing because somebody else thinks something different to us, we think we've got to persuade them otherwise, or try to analyze, why do they hold that view? It must be something that happened to them as a child. We try to overanalyze everything, but instead of really experiencing, oh, it feels like this is what it's like when somebody else holds a view that's different from mine. It hurts in some, it's quite. There's that discomfort of having of other people being different from us. How can we make suffering out of that? Isn't it incredible? Just because other people are different. As though, wouldn't it be awful if everyone was the same? But actually, because people are different, we create suffering out of it. When we understand suffering, we see that's ridiculous. It's just, we have to go into suffering to understand properly how it is, how we create it. That resistance, not wanting it to be this way. And the way out of it is to accept it's like this. So then we don't need to persuade people otherwise. We don't have to change the external conditions to be happy. That's a sustain. That's not even an effortful happiness, is it? There's nothing we need to do to be happy when we can accept things as they are. Doing activity. It's just letting things be. It doesn't take any real effort. In fact, effort gets in the way. Just allowing things to be as they are. When we try too hard, we try to change, we try to interfere. But it's letting things be. It doesn't take any effort. And that doesn't mean that everything's all right with the world. It doesn't mean that the other people's views are necessarily right. But it doesn't mean we have to persuade them otherwise. We can let things be. We can accept, or we can accept them as they are, as the beginning of a relationship, rather than thinking, if we could just change them, then I could love them. if I could just make them into somebody else, I'd be fine. Everything would be perfect. We just begin our relationship with people by accepting them as they are. I haven't noticed any questions. So do please send me a few questions. Otherwise, I'll just carry on talking. So I'm looking forward to having some questions that I can talk about. But isn't it interesting how we think we have to change other people? And if we could change them, everything would be fine, everything would be perfect.
Hi, Martin.
Go on, who's speaking? Oh, Will?
Sorry, Mariana, you go. Sorry, I think I cut you up.
Okay.
Oh, I think Mariana is letting me go. Yeah, hi,
Okay.
Martin. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just had a question about metta, actually, and sort of just on your last point there. It's an exercise I find more difficult, I guess, and the sort of terms around friendliness and the way it's sometimes explained, it doesn't resonate with me a lot. But I think recently I've sort of seen it as a way of cultivating actually acceptance.
I've got somebody's not muted, and it's becoming quite difficult to hear you. I think we're okay now. Carry on, Will.
Sorry, yeah. So it's around metta and viewing it really as more to do with acceptance and openness, which I find particularly useful for me, and feel like it's there's been some good results with that, I guess. But I'm just interested on your take on metta. Is this sort of metta, or because it seems quite similar to how you might view equanimity, for example. So yeah, just interested on that really.
Yes, acceptance is the greatest, for me, that's the greatest expression of loving kindness. So if you can accept people as they are, there's nothing, if we try too hard to love them, in a sense, it's as though there's something wrong with them. So we have to work hard at it, like we've judged them in some way and made them into somebody it's hard to love. So, yeah, accepting people as they are is where for me, is the expression of the highest, or it's what really loving kindness is. Really more of a loving acceptance. The word loving kindness, I think we put accepting people is an emphasis on the kindness part, but it is actually an unconditional love. Is accepting people as they are, isn't it? Which doesn't mean that that makes them perfect in some sort of way. Well, the interesting thing is that there's something lovable in everyone. If we find it hard to accept people, we just perhaps think of them as, their mother loved them. Nobody, I don't think any mother didn't love her child at some point in there. And so I think we can find something and connect with in a person that we can love, and then accepting them. We're not accepting that their faults as being good, something wrong that's right. It doesn't have, they don't have to be perfect. So I think that's right. I think acceptance is very helpful. For me, it's the beginning of every relationship. And if you can accept people, then you can influence them. You might be able to start a conversation, but if you can't accept people as they are, you can't begin. You haven't found a foundation for a relationship. Because if people think you're trying to, if people think you don't accept them, then they're resistant to whatever you have to say. I have a question from someone. What practices are helpful for the bereaved? Well, when we're bereaved, the experience, if we can completely accept that experience, then we'll feel it fully. That grief, whatever we experience, whatever feelings we experience, we'll experience fully. And if we can do that, then that experience will come and go. But if I'm not trying to judge people here and saying that there's something wrong if they feel that is that their feeling of grief is lasting a very long time, many years perhaps. But our practice is to experience fully, and then that's enough. Because when we can experience something fully, then it's finished. So if you feel that lingering sense of grief, which is understandable, maybe carry on for a few weeks, a few months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, many years, perhaps it never really comes to an end. But yet, when we can experience it fully, something fully, it comes to an end. We let it cease. It can cease in its own time, but it will naturally cease. So if we're still grieving, if it's still hurting, then perhaps bring that experience, allow that experience to come up into your meditation, and let it work. It's just to accept it and just let it work and experience it fully. That's my advice. That's the practice I think is most helpful for the bereaved, to experience fully. And then you learn a lot from that, because you realize that this is true of every emotional experience. If you can experience it fully, it just comes and goes. So our practice isn't about becoming like a rock that doesn't experience emotions, but rather the opposite, someone who can experience things fully without any resistance. When you can experience things fully without resistance, they come and go. That's how it is. They just arise. They exist for a while and they cease. They just leave of their own accord. There's no pushing away. There's no resistance. And we can do that before we experience bereavement. If we reflect on somebody that's very close to us, or even our own death, we're pretty close to ourselves. We can experience what it would be like, to lose that person or to die, and allow that experience to be fully experienced. And that will, when there's no resistance, it will just come and go. And this is really, really helpful, really good training, very good meditation practice, very good, useful, incredibly useful, beneficial in life. You can use this for anything, any kind of fear. It's basically to do with fear, isn't it? We're frightened of fully experiencing something. We're still pushing it away. It all comes down to fear. So little step by step, we can face our fears. And then we understand them. By understanding, we let them go. They disappear. There's no trace. Like the wind blowing through the trees. I like that simile because now it's autumn. You can see the wind blowing through the trees, and the leaves are starting to fall. And the leaves represent resistance. They hang around for a while, flapping about, but after a while, they fall. The tree lets them go. It really does. It creates a little layer of cells which almost breaks off. The leaf breaks off and falls. And then the wind can go through the tree. There's no resistance. That's why you get October gales before the leaves have fallen. They take trees over. But if you get a gale in November when the leaves have fallen, it doesn't do any damage. Or another example is when you get ivy growing on a tree, the leaves of the ivy can bring a tree down, because even though it's lost its leaves, the ivy leaves are still there. And that's an interesting thought. Has anyone else got any questions? Well, did you find that answer helpful?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Martin. I
Mariano here.
Okay, Mariano.
I did ask for the bereaved I've been tasked with producing some literature for the NHS and so on from the various traditions. And it is fair enough if someone is solid in the practice, you know, just open up to it, boy. But, you know, for Buddhists who are not that solid in the practice and are overwhelmed by grief, would you recommend the chanting maybe, or anything else?
There are so many helpful ways. They're not necessarily Buddhist. You know, going for a walk, getting out into the fresh air, seeing nature. You know, so many helpful ways to connect with the world. I think one of the greatest therapies is gardening. Go out and get your hands in the soil. You know, just so many different ways that we can find helpful, really helpful, healing ways. I'm talking about, as you say, quite rightly say, kind of an ultimate. I think it's okay to talk in terms of the ultimate. It's a sense of a direction of travel is to accept everything completely, gives us a sense of, oh, that's the direction of travel. But the journey can be a bumpy one. And so I think everything that we can, different ways that we can find, talking to people is really helpful. If you can have a good friend to talk things through with, just talking. I think groups like this, and this isn't really that kind of a discussion group, it doesn't really encourage that or help, you know, it doesn't work that way, but we learn a lot from even hearing ourselves speak. And when we talk to someone, and we can listen, not just to what other people say, but just listen to the way, how we talk about things to other people. I think, oh, that's interesting. I've learned something just by listening to the way I put it into words. And that can help us. Putting our experience into words can be a very, really helpful way to, and that's why people write diaries, isn't it, as well? Why they can find that very useful. Because it's a way of distancing ourselves a little from the experience so we can see it more clearly. But yeah, that direction of travel, it's maybe okay to talk about the ultimate destination, but the journey can be a bumpy one. And we need to find different ways to just get through from one moment to the next. But of course, if we have this maxim that it's everything is teaching us, that's very useful. So whatever we're experiencing is something that we can, if we can reflect on it. So this tool of learning how to reflect, if we can reflect on it, then we can learn from it. So reflecting is what I mean is it's a bit like that idea I had of being a case study, you know, that standing back from our experience and just to reflect on it, to see it more clearly is is the key, really. Learning how to reflect rather than kind of owning our experience and blinding, kind of boxing ourselves into this sense of me and mine, but to open out to the to a more of a case study approach, almost to learn from our experience. So I think that I'll just finish with the closing homage. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching, so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining. See you again.